Armchair commanders, we call the shots. From our living room thrones where the action's hot. We're the generals of fiction, the masters of war. In silver screen battles with buttered popcorn. Armchair commanders, armchair commanders.
All right, welcome to the Armchair Commanders podcast. My name is John.
And I'm Jack.
And this week, we are fortunate enough to be joined again by return guest and friend of the podcast, John from the Tattooed Historian channel. John, welcome, and if you'd like to tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thanks for having me back, guys. I really appreciate that. My name's John R. Heckman. I run the Tattooed Historian on many platforms, but especially YouTube nowadays. I've been doubling down there and trying to do more video content on top of my podcast, the Tattooed Historian Show. And I did it just to try to make history more accessible. I know that's a buzzword now with accessibility, but just wanted to make sure people got some kind of connection with the past, and here I am studying it for a PhD. So let's see how that goes.
How is your PhD going so far?
It's going very well, thanks. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the whole process, and I'm reading more than I've ever read. Getting ready for comps in a year, and but reading some cool stuff about digital history and historians and social media and all kinds of stuff. So it's kind of, in a way, it's looking back into the stuff I've done and seeing where things have gone right and gone wrong and where we can make things a little bit easier.
Nice. Now, it's actually kind of, I don't know if it's necessarily good timing, but we're actually basically 1 year apart from the last time we had you on. Last time we had you on, it was for our anniversary special episode for the Battle of Gettysburg, where we did the movie of the same name. And I know I had sent you a message a while back, but I do want to get this done and out of the way, where I would formally like to issue you an apology for my rating of that film. I know it's one of your favorite Civil War films, and I wasn't very kind to it when I rated it. But my one defense to it is we had just gotten started, so we didn't have that many film reviews under our belts yet. So I guess I didn't have much in the way of comparison to know that Gettysburg really wasn't all that bad. So I would like to rescind my rating from the last time you were here. Gettysburg is not a one charge up a hill film. It's at least a 3. But what changed that is we reviewed Field of Lost Shoes like a month or two ago, and it opened my eyes to how bad a film really could be. So
Yeah, that's once you start to look at the plethora of Civil War films out there, it really opens your eyes, right, to how good Gettysburg was for its time, and it's kind of stayed that way for a while. There aren't that many Civil War films that I like, and it just has been on my radar ever since it came out. So it's got longevity.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure if timeless is the right word, but it's close to being one.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about how much Gettysburg is just synonymous with the entire war. When people think of the Civil War, they usually think of Gettysburg or something to that effect. And then you have that popular history in that film, which has tinges of how we felt about the Civil War in 1992. In 1993, you see some of the Lost Cause stuff come out in it. It's a really good piece for trying to figure out what we felt at that time about things, but the action in it is some of the best action on film as far as Civil War movies are concerned. And it's like you say, I don't know if I'd use the word timeless like you say, you wouldn't either, but It's just one. It's there. You know, it's there if you want to see it. It's solid, and you just move on from there and compare it with other things, and it's by itself in its own little way.
I think the probably the most applicable thing to it was you mentioned the whole lost cause narrative, and that was something we talked about rather in depth during our review of that film. But when we reviewed Field of Lost Shoes, I remember Jack said something to the effect of like, man, I didn't know that the South was so affable towards black people during this time.
Yeah, right, Jack.
Yeah, it goes to show how little I know.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it really showcased some of the reenactorisms we had in the '90s and how it was influenced by that kind of mentality. And it came out in that film, you know. So, yeah, totally understand that. I couldn't honestly, I couldn't make it through the whole film. So if you did, congratulations. Uh, so I had to turn it off. So yeah,
I It was one of those films that I was like, I would by the time I ended, I was kind of hate watching it.
yeah, yeah.
But for that film, we did our rating was sausage links because there's a scene where one of the boy soldiers is accused of stealing food,
Mm.
and I I didn't even give it a full sausage link. I was like, this is just a sausage casing that's in the bottom of the bag that got trampled.
Yeah, it's a doozy. It's a doozy.
So I think it'd be a good point to transition to our point of discussion today, which is when I asked you to come back, you brought up a film. I had heard of it, and I had seen clips of it, but I had never seen it start to finish, which is the 1970 film Waterloo. And John, what made you go with this particular film?
Two things. One, I figured we'd stay to the name of the battle since we did Gettysburg first. We'll do the one-liner, the one-word battles, and we'll do Waterloo. Two, in my opinion, it's still the best Napoleon movie ever made. So, and that's saying something. Like I'll go out on a limb and say that, especially in light of the most recent one. This is still the best, the go-to, even though it was 1970. I also kind of have a soft spot for Rod Steiger, who plays Napoleon. I thought he did an excellent job, and we'll get deeper into that as we go along. But he was he was a guy who grew up with some very hardcore depression, and he had depression later in life. I mean, it haunted him his entire life. And as someone who has had previous bouts of that, it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to try to understand this guy a little bit and try to think about what he's going through while he's doing this movie and other films, and sometimes not being taken seriously or being told he's overacting, which we'll talk about in this movie too. So kind of the lead guy in this is someone I admire from that standpoint. And Christopher Plummer is Duke of Wellington. You know, it's a classic 1970s war movie, and there's just so much involved with it.
Like I said, I had never seen it start to finish. My exposure to this film has been purely, you know, YouTube doing what it does, where it's like, oh, we know you like these types of movies, so let us bombard you with like the highlights of these films. So I'd seen a lot of like the highlights of the film, but I wasn't quite sure what I was going to take from this, but I was really surprised. I mean, I think this movie is very much an epic in the sense of the word. And I think that word gets tossed around a lot. But when, and we'll probably want to spend a significant amount of time talking about the battle scene itself. But when you actually see them like pan out and do like aerial shots of the battle, and you realize that yes, this is 1970s and there are literally tens of thousands of extras recreating this battle, it's truly impressive. It's not something you see today or probably ever will see again.
No, this be so heavily CGI now that that it wouldn't work, and it worked in large part because the Soviets provided a deal. They said we'll do it cheaper, and we'll give you 15,000 soldiers to do this and to pull this off. And I think it was a 2,000 cavalrymen, 15,000 foot soldiers, and 50 circus performers because someone had to fall off the horses. So they brought in circus performers to do those kinds of things. But I believe the Soviets, Mosfilm was the Russian film studio who agreed to do the production, and they said this is how much we need to do it, and it was basically a third of the cost of what it would have been if it was strictly done by an American film company or somewhere else in Europe. It costs in $1970. It cost $38 million to shoot this film, and that's only because of the Russians. They basically say, "Oh, we'll cut you a deal." So,
Yeah, that's one of the things that really surprised me about this was the fact that it was USSR backed, but the fact that it was $38 million and still considered to be budget, like that was going to be like one of the most expensive films of its time, regardless.
yeah, yeah. The battle scene that we're going to talk about, just the Battle of Waterloo, cost $5 million to shoot. So that's huge. That's a huge amount of money to be pouring out there, and it's the largest battlefield ever used on film. Forget Gettysburg. This is the largest battlefield ever used on film. So there's a whole lot of logistics going on here that we'll talk about. There's a whole lot of money. And as you said, there's a whole lot of extras. When you're getting 15,000 Soviet soldiers out there, along with people who are from other European nations who are filling in and doing stuff, it's pretty crazy. And like I say, it is an epic, in my opinion, too.
So, my question for you, would it have been cheaper to just make a new Waterloo battle instead of reenact one?
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to pay the extras, or at least the dead ones.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really. I mean, it is crazy to think of how big this movie was from a production standpoint. It is immense, and like I said, the final cost is $38 million in U.S. in $1970. I don't know what that is in 2024 dollars, but quick Google search, you'll be able to figure that out. And then, the Soviets actually, bulldoze the fields to make it look like Waterloo, even though there's some, things that are missed in there as well, some hills that should have been there weren't there, and things like that. But they bulldozed down two massive hills in Ukraine, excuse me, laid miles of roads. They transplanted something like 5,000 trees to do this. They put in fields of rye and barley and wildflowers. They reconstructed 4 buildings. They put underground irrigation in to recreate the mud at Waterloo. So this is an epic beyond just like seeing it as an epic film. It's an epic thing to do logistically. I mean, they pulled out all the stops to make this happen.
Yeah, it reminds me of that quote from World War One that's like, "We may not win the battle, but we will certainly change the geography." And I just find it hilarious that for this movie, they literally changed the geography of an entire place to accomplish it.
Yeah, Yeah, it's crazy. Well, we have to think it's also the Soviets, and the Soviet Union at this time is how big, and they're thinking, okay, we'll just take this chunk out of Ukraine and make a film set, and we'll get some money for doing it, and it'll show us in a different light because we helped this Italian film company to do this massive movie. And you have people in the cast who are obviously Russian. You have Italians, you have Irish, you have Americans, Canadians, and Brits, and everyone who was on set, at least who had some sort of role in firing weapons or just being on camera a lot, they had to speak enough English to get by because they're getting commands in English to do certain movements and stuff. Well, you can't be giving it in 15 languages, so they're trying to teach these guys how to do certain things in English maybe for the first time. There's a whole lot of stuff going on behind the scenes to make this authentic as possible. And it's just a triumph in that way, in my opinion. For 1970, it's a triumph.
One of the things I saw, because obviously I said I'd seen clips of this before, but I saw on YouTube there was somebody that made the comment that's like, imagine being a Russian conscript and then on the first day of showing up to the army, you're handed a French uniform and a flintlock musket. And I could only imagine how confused you would be. Just be like, man, I thought we were bad off, but I didn't realize we were that bad off.
Yeah.
Budget cuts.
Yeah, budget cuts, exactly. How's that Cold War going for you?
The other part of it too is being Soviet backed. I'm surprised at how little propaganda influence we see in it. Because it definitely doesn't strike me as being really pro military or pro war.
Yeah, it's also as you say, John, with the idea of it being a lot of Soviet stuff is pro military and things like that because it is in the heart of the Cold War at this time. This is a very anti-war film in many cases. I mean, you got Rod Steiger, who is the same year that this is done, 1970, he turns down the role for Patton. They were going to make him Patton. And Rod Steiger turns it down because he says he doesn't want to glorify war. He later said, quote, the dumbest career move I ever made. And he said, I got on my high horse. I thought I was a pacifist. And he really was. I mean, he was an anti-McCarthyist. He did not like Charlton Heston. He's an interesting character, but he turned down the role of Patton, and then George C. Scott got it.
It's probably for the best because, I mean, granted, I think it's interesting to think what those role reversals would have looked like, but I can't imagine anybody other than George C. Scott playing Patton because he very much, owned that role.
Yeah, and I can't think of anybody playing Napoleon better in a movie than this guy. I mean, it's kind of like they fit. It works. When I think of Napoleon now, sometimes I think of Rod Steiger before I think of the actual guy, which is nuts. But it's because this film was in my head at an early age. And when I think of Patton, I think of George C. Scott. And I'm like, why is George C. Scott in A Christmas Carol right now? I don't get it. Or why is Patton in A Christmas Carol? So, yeah, it's kind of one of those things where when you see Steiger in this film, he looks pretty darn good as Napoleon. And, it just works.
Something that legitimately I had to pause this movie and double check to make sure I was seeing it right was I was completely thrown through a loop when I saw Orson Welles playing King Louis because I just was not expecting that.
Yes. Yeah, that's a little curveball. Yeah, Orson gets a cameo, a few scenes. Orson's about done. Orson's been around a while, but he's still going. But he's Louis the 18th for that film, and yeah, He doesn't have many lines. He kind of harumphs around a little bit, with his wordage. Putting down military officers, saying what they're going to do to other military officers as far as we'll bring him to you in an iron cage. And Orson's like, I never asked him to bring this guy to me in an iron cage. These guys are so weird, basically. These military officers, they're always trying to go over the top with things. And yeah, but for some reason, the voice and the demeanor kind of works for it. And again, it's the 1970s, and it's like we're going to give a nod to Orson, and here, take this cameo and enjoy it. So.
Also, was he like wearing a fat suit for this? Because he seemed like really large, like it almost seemed like a prosthetic.
Orson's pretty big. It might have been. Jack may know, but I don't know. Orson was a big guy. I don't know by then how big he is, though. Jack, do you have any idea how big Orson was?
No.
No. Yeah.
I don't it.
Yeah, because Orson grew up. He became a big man. He's not War of the Worlds Orson.
All right, so just looked it up, and apparently his cause of death was attributed to his substantial weight gain. When he passed, he was over 350 pounds, so that was all him.
Christ.
That is all Orson.
That's Orson and a half.
Yeah.
Here, I thought we were having like a Brendan Fraser in the Whale moment, and I was going to be like, man, they put a lot of money into that makeup, but nope.
Yeah, that's just him. That's just Orson, But yeah, a lot of people are shocked when they watch this movie, and all of a sudden here's Orson Welles, in this movie that some people just have never seen before, because it's not. How should I say it? It's not shown like it was. Like, you're not going to watch it on a Saturday streaming somewhere. You got to go on like YouTube to find it or something.
Yeah, this film kind of falls into that trap that we've been having issues with recently, which is a little bit more obscure films not being on the streaming services, which kind of makes me wonder, like, why am I paying streaming service money when it costs essentially the same as cable at this point? But like, I get a little cranky because it's like, if I can't find something on Netflix or Hulu, then I'm like, oh, I have to spend $3 on Amazon. But then when I can't even find it on Amazon, that's where the real challenge starts. But like, case in point is like last week we had a movie we reviewed where we ended up having to go to like a .ru URL, and I'm pretty sure I have like a KGB agent who is watching all of my movements now. But, on the plus side, we got the movie watched, but it's interesting what media is and isn't available.
Yes, they're listening in right now.
Oh my god, so much porn.
Yes.
It's like I didn't even know that they made Napoleon themed porn, but I suppose there's something for everybody.
No, but it's probably out there.
To Google.
I guarantee you it's probably out there. I'm not going to look it up, but it's probably out. All right, Jack, look up Louis the 18th's version as Orson Welles, and get back to me in like 10 minutes.
Napoleon XXX #1, a diary of a sexual conqueror from France.
Oh my gosh.
Jesus, of course there is.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think about the conversation we had last week where we talked about a Sam Elliott film where he like is hunting down Bigfoot, and we discussed pretty heavily about the topic of Bigfoot erotica, which I don't know if you've ever been to the wrong side of book talk algorithms, but like I was not aware of how popular like monster smut was nowadays.
Okay. That's not my algorithm, but okay.
Don't lie to us.
Oh no, I ain't telling no lies. I've got it. I've had enough of the Hawk Tuah girl for everybody. I'll tell you that. Jeez, I'm glad you didn't have a part in this movie. I guarantee you.
I can't wait till they start using that clip to teach kids what an onomatopoeia is.
Yes. Yeah.
So to kind of move on, you know, as far as a movie goes, I think when people think of Napoleon, they're expecting a biopic, kind of like what came out with Joaquin Phoenix or whatnot, because he's a very important person in early 1800s, major impact on the world. But this really only takes a look at 100 day span of his life, and it's him getting exiled the first time and returning from that. So my question for you is, what do you think of as far as this movie just being within that 100 day span of Napoleon's life?
I think that it is the most interesting part of the story of Napoleon because it's his basically it's his form of coming home and in his mind coming home and trying to have one last moment of legitimacy and feeling like he's been left behind and left alone and even though he's on Elba and all this other stuff it's this idea that he let me put it to you this way. I like tragedies because I grew up on Shakespearean tragedies, Hamlet, Macbeth, that kind of stuff. This is a tragedy for anyone who's a fan of Napoleon and anyone who was on Napoleon's side at this time. So I really am intrigued by this last gasp of Napoleonic France in that way, or at least the first Napoleon. Um, and what that sets the stage for in the future. We can we can definitely talk about people can talk about his time during the Revolution and his time in the early 1800s to his initial fall. But this period is kind of like the do or die situation for Napoleon, and it's also the do or die situation for the Allies because they're like, we need to get rid of this guy once and for all and be done with it. And it's a really intriguing part. And for people who can't or who want to understand a little bit about Napoleon, but don't want to read, these 900-page tomes and stuff like that, it's a really good introduction to try to understand who this guy was, even though it's the end of his career, if you will. I just think it's a great tragedy movie for some people, and for others, it'll be, a heroic stand of the Allies against this person, and it's a really intriguing part of history to me. What brings this guy back, and how does he get so much support right away, or nearly right away, and how does he get this far, coming back from being ostracized, and taken away to Elba, and it's just a really cool thing to study as far as the human psyche, with thinking you're not done yet. There's things you still have to do in life. I'm not finished. People think I'm finished, but I'm not. And that's Napoleon in 1815. He's really thinking, I'm going to come back and save my country, but I'm also not done yet, even though people have counted me out. And I think that's a story that a lot of people can connect with, even though, there aren't many things maybe we can connect with Napoleon. It's just that idea and that psyche, I think, is really intriguing.
Jack, what did you think about the format of this being, that kind of 100 day span?
The pacing was a bit weird in the beginning because it shows him, about to be exiled to Elba, freaking out and screaming, Wellington, 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 over and over again, which I texted and called John to let him know. And then he's banished to Elba for, well, it said 10 months, but I clocked it at like 2.5 minutes. and then he's back, and the famous scene of no one wanting to shoot him, and in fact everyone joining him. And then business as usual. We're back, going on tour. Tour is canceled at Waterloo.
I love how Jack, you make it sound like I need to get like tickets at Ticketmaster for this. The grand tour has been canceled.
The We're Back tour.
Yeah, yeah. It is a really interesting thing, and there is some over the top acting in this, like the guy who faints because he's so overwhelmed with emotion. Apparently, he can't shoot Napoleon, and he kind of just faints there, and then the crowd goes crazy, kind of thing. Yeah, and the guy, and I don't mean to skip ahead, but the guy, the British soldier who comes out between the lines and says we shouldn't kill each other and all this other stuff. That's straight up 1970s Cold War anti-war stuff. And again, going back to what we said about Gettysburg, time and place of production. That really comes out in this as well. When you think, okay, this is 1970, the Vietnam War is still going on, all this stuff is happening. So there's going to be these tinges of or tangents, if you will, of anti-war sentiment in it that are kind of over the top. A British soldier isn't going to go out between the lines at Waterloo and try to express his dread at their killing each other that way. You may have some sort of stress and anxiety, we call post-traumatic stress, or someone, goes crazy, quote unquote, but that's kind of over the top. The guy fainting because he's not going to shoot Napoleon, that's kind of over the top. But it's classic 1970s film at that point, But I totally get it, Jack, where we're talking about a longer period of history, and it seems like we're just fast forwarding in the VHS 2.5 minutes, and now we're here. I get it. The one thing that I did appreciate, though, was at least it was in chronological order.
Yeah.
It was nice. Yeah, not like the new Napoleon film where I have no idea what's going on. Why are we talking about this now, or why isn't this back here, or anything like that? At least this one's in chronological order, and like you say, John, there's no like flashbacks or things like that. I think that helps with the strength of it. But there are things that, I mean, this movie's already a little over 2 hours. If you got to put some R stuff in there, you're working on a 3-hour epic, and that period of movie making, I don't know where we had a 3-hour movie in the 1970s. I'm sure there was one or two or something, but Apocalypse Now is 1970s. That's long.
I think you have to look kind of back more towards like the 60s for those super long movies, like Lawrence of Arabia and what have you.
Yeah, Ben-Hur, Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah, the Technicolor stuff.
Inglorious Technicolor.
Yes. Then you're getting the epics, 3 hours with an intermission. But yeah, you're starting to get shorter pieces now by 1970, but then you get those Apocalypse Nows, that come out or something like that. So I think for the audience, this is probably just the right amount of time, just over 2 hours. And when you see something longer, the intermission is kind of around 2 hours, in that time frame. So, and when you got this much money poured into it, how much are you going to put into it as well? I mean, when you're spending $5 million just to shoot the battle, what else are we going to put into it?
I personally, I'm fine with this movie being in that kind of like 2 hour mark. I agree with Jack in the sense that the pacing in this definitely did seem off. Like when we get to the actual battle, I thought the battle was fantastic and it was appropriately paced and all that. I had a great time watching the battle. But when we're at the initial point of like, take the beginning of the film where it's like, you need to be exiled, and then he comes back, there's this lull that we kind of hit where we're starting to warm up to the battle, if you will, where it's like, the thing that really got me was like the military ball scene. It just was so slow paced and kind of boring. Like I fell asleep. I had to restart the movie because of it. But it was one of those things where it's like, I don't know, it just didn't really seem to fit in.
I totally get that. As far as the military ball is concerned, totally get that. Understand it. There is a little bit of storyline involved there, but it's late in the scene. It's when Wellington finds out that Napoleon is back and he's on the move, and people are with him. The army's with him again. But yeah, some of it goes on too long because this pageantry, this over the top pageantry kind of scene. And I think, I'm not making excuses, but I think that's just also time and place when this is filmed. You got a lot of this kind of stuff going on in film at that time, especially with British movies about British officers somewhere, in the 19th century or even the 18th century. You have these kind of grandiose, over the top scenes with fancy uniforms and dresses and all that stuff. It's I totally get it though, and sometimes I find myself just fast forwarding through that part because it does kind of. It's like, okay, fine, we got guys who are dancing around swords. This is great. I'm Scottish, and I'm like, okay, that's enough, So
Something I find in those kinds of moments is like, if there's not something that's really kind of progressing the stories, I'll start focusing on things that really don't matter. Like, so they're in this giant ballroom, and there's like hundreds, if not thousands, of just candles. And I found myself in this scene just focusing on the candles because I'm like, you guys are wearing super fancy like wool uniforms, and there's like hundreds of people. And on top of that, you have, 1,000 some lit candles hanging from chandeliers. And I'm just like, that has to be miserable just being in that room. And I think that's not something I should be focusing on when I'm watching a movie.
yeah, this is a fire hazard. Yeah, yeah, and it's I don't know. It's just this over the top pageantry that keeps coming up in the mythology of what it actually looked like and people participating in it. But it's even though it's even though Moss Film is really behind this and the Russian production company is really invested in this, it's another case of history and Hollywood only having one thing in common, and that's they begin with the same letter. That's just the way it is. The more pageantry we can do it, maybe we can appeal to a different audience to come in and watch this. And so you see the previews for the movie, and they're showing that as part of the previews. The people dancing and the merriment that goes on until everyone learns that Napoleon is back. And I really think that's for them to try to get another audience there instead of guys who just want to go in and talk tactics about Napoleon.
It makes me think of like the Avatar: The Last Airbender line where it's like, the nations lived in harmony until the Fire Nation attacked, but instead it's, everybody was happy until Napoleon showed up on the scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, remember the doors or the windows open up and the wind comes through, and that's the storm arriving. This that's what it's supposed to be, is the storm of the winds of war coming back.
Really fucking heavy-handed there.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
and only like one candle goes out.
yeah, I was really expecting one of the guests to like look up and say, "Jesus Christ, the wind blew open the window and blew out a candle and ruined this dance. This is evocative of our feelings of Napoleon coming back from his exile."
Yeah, yeah.
And I just really want to mention that one chick at the dance that was like, "Oh, Mommy, I love this boy. He's going off to war. Oh, please bring me back a helmet." And I was like, "Oh, he's fucking dead."
Yeah.
He's fucking dead.
Thanks, Captain Exposition.
Yeah, you know that guy's gonna die.
Directly into the camera when
That's
you
right.
say, "This is my fiance. I hope I make it back to her."
Yeah. Break that fourth wall. Yeah.
Speaking of fourth wall breaks, there was one fourth wall break, and I know we'll get more into it when we actually start talking about the battle later. But when they're like handing out gin rations to the troops before the battle actually starts, there's like this one guy that you know is like, I've got a line in a major movie and I'm going to sell it. And he's standing next to this guy who's like crossing himself and like praying. He's like, oh, it's never good luck to be standing next to a man so close to God, but like he's staring directly into the camera. It's like, who are you talking to?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like this is very House of Cardish. You know, it's like what are we doing with this? But yeah, it's again, it's the cinematography of that time period. Uh, and yeah, when would you say the battle starts? Would you say would you say the battle scenes start when the artillery opens up at Waterloo, or would you say it starts when we get that scene of Ney coming back? Marshal Ney comes and says to Napoleon, you know, I got Wellington on the run. Would you say the battle scenes start then, or would you say the battle scenes start with, uh, you know, the opening artillery at Waterloo?
I would say for me, I consider the actual like Battle of Waterloo part starting like when they show it being the morning of and like the troops are starting to line up and like actually get into their formations. That for me is when I would count it.
Mm. Mm. Jack, what do you think?
I just hope both teams had fun at the Battle of Waterloo.
I think they did. Yeah.
Well, the French didn't.
Oh no. I mean, yeah.
I really would have killed to see a scene of like a line of soldiers of both sides just slapping hands after the battle saying, "Good game, good game, good game."
Something that this film did kind of make me notice or realize, and I mean, you know, take Gettysburg for example. This, you know, in that movie, the battle is the entire movie, and like that is the sole focus of everybody. But like in this movie, we have multiple instances where like the generals are kind of just removed and are almost kind of unconcerned at some points. Like there's a moment where like I see Napoleon like step away, and he's like taking like a nap or something, and then he comes back all pissed off. He's like, I can't even leave the battlefield for 5 minutes. I'm like, when did you think you had the luxury to leave in the first place?
Yeah. Oh, he's dealing with stomach issues at that time. He's having some problems, and and he's got to walk away. Actually, hands over command for a short period of time to Marshal Ney, and so that's kind of true to form in a way with that. But yeah, it almost makes it seem like he's just exhausted and tired, and he needs to go take a nap. In actuality, he's actually like suffering from stomach ailments at the battle, and he's got to give command over to Ney for a short period of time. Uh, he started having problems apparently around the time that he defeated the Prussians at Ligny just before, when Ney comes up and says to him, I have Wellington on the run. And Napoleon's like, what the hell are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. I just won this battle against the Prussians, and now you're going to lose it. He's starting to have some issues health wise, and it really comes to a head at Waterloo. That's not to like make an excuse for his performance or anything like that. It's just the fact that he's having some ailments where he's got to actually like go sit down a while and take a time out because his stomach is really bothering him. And Ney takes over and things happen with Ney in command. But yeah, uh, uh, Wellington's right there with the guys, you know, for most of the fight. He's pretty close to the action, so much so that some of the men are trying to tell him, "Hey, you're a little close here, buddy." But he always liked to be right there in the thick of it. That was kind of his style. And even though he thought his soldiers were, you know, uh, just ragamuffins, ruffians, he didn't respect his soldiers that way. But he knew they would fight for him, and he was right there for the most part with them. Ney was another one on the French side, led from damn near the front all the time. Napoleon he's where he should be as a field commander many times, but there is that a chance that, or there is that moment where he does fall slightly ill and needs to be taken elsewhere for a short time, and command has to be given over, and that's when the battle really starts to kind of take a turn when that happens, when Ney's in command. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. To beat the French.
Angus.
Yeah, I love that because he's not going to concern himself with taking the offensive. He's letting Napoleon come to him. And remember, when the battle opens with this French bombardment, and Napoleon starts sending troops in, he sends them in against Hougoumont and La Haye Sainte, and he's expecting Wellington to move, maneuver troops around to check this move, and Wellington stands firm, and he doesn't move, and that really irritates Napoleon for a short time. He's like, "Why is this guy not moving? What is he hiding, or why is he just dumb? Why is he not moving?" And yeah, so Wellington he has a simple battle plan, like he says, like Plummer says in the movie, beat the French. That's it. And he's letting them come to him, and I think it is the best way to put a defensive strategy. What are you going to do today, General? We're just going to beat the French, or we're going to beat whoever. In other words, we're going to let them come to us, and then we're going to sweep them from the field, and that's it. We're going to push them back. What kind of a battle plan do you need with that? You're not sending people out around the flank, or doing something else. You're waiting for them to come to you and maybe make a mistake, and then you know, and then you just use that to your advantage. I do love that scene though, John. It's one of my favorites in the whole movie because it's like quintessential British officer too. What are we gonna do today? Oh, we're just gonna beat them. That's all. Yeah, ego, arrogance, and Wellington had that. Wellington was arrogant and egotistical, um, but he's a guy who has a great battle record, and he kind of knows. Like, he uses hills to his advantage in many battles where he'll hide troops behind hills, and Napoleon knows that. And Steiger in the movie as Napoleon, and one of the lines is, something to the effect of he's probably hiding men behind those hills again, or something like that. And it's like, yeah,
Or men hidden in the grass field. That was a moment I really enjoyed, was the guys who were all hiding and like popped up at just the right moment, like just chilling out for a majority of the battle, and then like they have that haha we have you
yeah,
moment.
first foot. Yeah, the first foot guard. Yeah.
The other moment that I really enjoyed in this movie that like really demonstrates how massive of like a filming project this was. Like, we've already mentioned the numbers of people in it, but like when we get that giant aerial shot with the cavalry charge, and they go into
Mm-hmm.
the cavalry squares, like I thought that was so impressive, and like that's one of those moments where you truly like understand like how big this movie and this scene is.
Yeah, and that helicopter shot. That's what they're filming that off of. They're filming that out of a helicopter. when they're filming the aerial view of that, that's out of a helicopter, and you really see how immense this production is. You know, when you have 2,000 cavalrymen, French cavalrymen in this scene, uh, they they're charging headlong into these soldiers that are in squares, and God, it's so immense to see, and it's in an era before drones, you know, and how easy it would be to make that shot today. Like I could make that shot if we had 15,000 people in a drone, but this is 1970 in a helicopter, and it's just an amazing cinematic shot for that period because there's so much going on in that one camera shot, and you could watch that film 20 times over that one scene, and you'll pick something different out. Like, oh, I didn't see that the last time. It's just one of those fantastic scenes.
I think one of the other aspects that like that scene really exemplifies in this film is, you know, I don't know if you've ever had that kind of like aha moment like when you've visited a battlefield, but like I personally, you know, I have been a history nerd for a very long time. And you know, take Gettysburg for example. Like I studied the Civil War, read tons of books, saw the maps, this, that, and the other. Like saw the numbers, and I understood it as being this massive battle. But you don't really appreciate, or at least for me, I had a an aha moment when it came to actually visiting the physical site of Gettysburg, because it's one of those things where it's like, if you look at Pickett's charge, you know, you read, oh, these men crossed a mile long field, and you're like, oh, when you read that, a mile isn't that far. But then, like, when you're actually standing in the spot where they left from, and you're looking across this massive field, you're like, oh, that's a long ass way to be under like constant artillery fire. So like that's something I really want to give this movie props for is like the sheer you see the sheer size of the battlefield and like the absolute incredible number of people involved in the film. Like I think people could have that kind of like clicking moment for them where they can truly appreciate the size and magnitude of this battle.
Battle. And it's why it's just not only because of Napoleon being defeated, but because of the sheer size. It's why it's become one of these things where when you find Europeans who have ancestors who fought at Waterloo, they're proud of it. You know, even if they're French, they're proud of it because it's like Gettysburg. People are proud to say they had an ancestor who was there or something. It's this cultural icon of a battle that is symbolic of some period of struggle in any countries or in any of these three countries' time frames. And I really think that that whole aerial shot allows us to think of numbers in a different way. I mean, I didn't know what you know, a massive amount of artillery from the 19th century sounded like until I did one event in the 90s where we had 45 cannon on one side of the field and there were like almost 40 on the other side, and we were, you know, shooting away at each other with this stuff. You heard the noise and you're like, okay, this is like 85 guns firing, you know, and the noise just from that was immense. And now think of what it was at Waterloo, or think of what it was at Gettysburg, or not only the numbers, but just the sound would have just been immense. And they try to bring that across in this film as far as the sound is concerned, and they try to um, showcase the the armaments in different ways. I think one of the weaknesses is, you know, the large diesel fueled cannonball rounds that are hitting the ground, but that's the 1970s film, especially Russian. Yeah, yeah, and that's especially in Russian films too. You know, they love their diesel fuel. They'll set them off for explosions all day long. And I'm like, you know, An eight, like a 12 pounder or an 8 pounder is not going to cause an explosion like that, unless it hits a limber. It's not, it's not slamming into the ground and it looks like it's like Vietnam 1968 with napalm, but yeah, I'm sure the boom was amazing. And I'm sure the guys in the lines were like, it got hot pretty quick because I've been around diesel fuel when it goes off from several hundred yards away, and I felt it. And I'm like, these guys are only like, 100 meters from away from some of these explosions that are going off. So I'm sure there was some singed neck hair and stuff like that from all this, but um, it's just amazing to think of how immense this thing actually was. The real thing actually was. There were only moments. There were a few moments where it was eye rolling. One is those explosions. Two was that soldier who goes out between the lines and is
How could we do this to each other?
yeah, and crying for everybody to stop and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I've never seen that in the official records, but okay. Um, I'm glad they played up the mud in it. I mean, they laid those lines in the ground, to be like, okay, this irrigation piping is going to allow us to showcase the mud. So the mud is a key player in it. Granted, you don't see it all throughout the film, but I'm glad they do talk about it, that it's in there. As far as yeah, there's other things too. I mean, when the Prussians arrive on the field, the music is Deutschland über alles, and it's like no, that wasn't the Prussians didn't do that, and that was post World War I anthem stuff. How else do we know they're German, right? And so okay, and I think the actor who was playing Blucher was Polish, I think, in that. So that's kind of a weird twist to that as well. But and I forget his name. He dies the year after the film comes out. The guy who plays Blucher, so he is an old man, just like Blucher was at the battle. So he was very authentic. But yeah, authenticity wise, I mean, obviously it's 1970 and things aren't going to be as authentic as they could be. However, it's pretty damn good. It's pretty good for what you're getting. I mean, we have to understand that when we watch these movies, it's for entertainment for the most part. It's not a documentary. But when you see those numbers, like we talked about earlier, and you see uh, how these men are using the equipment and especially the infantry and stuff like that. The infantry do pretty well in this film, I think. And I just, the only thing is, the artillery is you're not seeing the recoil you should be seeing and some other stuff, but that's little nitpicky things. As far as the battle is concerned, no, I think it's pretty well done for what we're seeing. And I think it's kind of like when we talked about Gettysburg. It's pretty well done. There are little things that kind of weird, but at the same time, the overall theme is really, really good. So for me, it's been like a solid, 7.5 out of 10 for me because of that. As far as the authenticity is concerned with the battle scenes and stuff.
So slightly off topic or tangent, but still slightly related. You know, I follow you on your different social medias, and I saw you got to participate in quite a few of the Normandy anniversary events. So obviously, post him being exiled, part two, Electric Boogaloo. That's where he stayed, and that's where he actually died. And then, later on, he would end up being brought back and be put into this massive tomb in Paris. Did you get a chance to check that out, or was that on the itinerary when you were in France?
That wasn't on the itinerary for that trip. I was pretty booked solid for that trip in just the Normandy region. The only time I had in Paris was at the airport, so I didn't have any time to really see anything in Paris. I'm going to be spending a day and a half in Paris in October on the next trip, where I'm a tour historian, and I believe I have a half day off in Paris. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I have an option. I can spend the half day in Paris and see what I want, or I have the option to go to Versailles. So I'm trying to weigh my options, like which one better suits me and what I want to do. I'm also hoping that there's like a flea market going on in Paris that day or something because they're known for that. But I would love to get around to see Napoleon's tomb, and they have a fantastic army museum in Paris uh, for the French army, and I think that would be something else I would love to see. So October is going to be an interesting time for me to try to figure out where the heck I'm going on that half day off in Paris. But I know that my interest in Napoleon, as far as a military commander is concerned, is really piqued my interest as far as maybe taking that trip and just going to see it. I have to see if I can hail a cab or something and get to the Army Museum or get to Napoleon's grave and hang out there a while. But yeah, I didn't have a chance to do it in June. I was strictly doing Normandy stuff and leading a tour of the American sectors in Normandy, which was a huge honor for me. And as someone who has previously been told you'll never lead a battlefield tour, you'll never be able to do it, you can't do it, it was a lot of fun to have that positive chip on my shoulder and be like, watch me, we're going to do it. And to be able to do it in Normandy is just a huge honor. I know that next year, I'm also for 2025, I'm considering going to Belgium, and next year is in June is Waterloo. So 2025, we're talking 210 years. So I may be able to do something there as well. I'd like to connect the dots maybe and go see Napoleon's grave or his tomb, and then next year go to Waterloo, where it was all doomed to failure for him. So we'll see. But there's so much out there that I haven't gotten to see, and I know many people who know so much more than I do and have walked those fields, reenacted on the Waterloo battlefield, and they have some tremendous stories involved with that. But it's like you said earlier, you don't really get it until you stand there. You witnessed that at Gettysburg. I witnessed that at Normandy, where I didn't really get Omaha Beach until I stood on Omaha Beach, and then I got it. Or San Mariglis, where the 82nd Airborne parachuted into. We see it in movies, we read about it in books, we look at maps. Those are all beautiful things, and there are things to fuel our fire. But until you stand there and feel that ground underneath you and feel those ridge lines and look across those valleys, you don't get it 100%. And I'm hoping to, click a few more boxes as far as these places are concerned. I'd love to go to Quatre Bras, where Ney was pushing back against Wellington, Ligny, where Napoleon defeated the Prussians, and then move on up the road to Waterloo and kind of do these campaigns like we should have seen, or these battles like we should have seen in this movie to the full extent. Quatre Bras is a fantastic battle. Ligny is a fantastic battle. Sending off Grouchy with 30,000 men to try to shadow the Prussians. I would love to walk all that and understand it a little bit more, because we can watch this movie 30, 40, 50 times. But if we don't walk it, do we really understand it? Same with Gettysburg. You can watch it 40, 50 times. Do you understand what that looks like across that mile until you stand there? So, you know.
See, I already have a couple events that I'm trying to tentatively make plans, and hopefully they work out. You know,
Mm.
with 2025 and 2026 coming up, there's a lot of 250th anniversary events for the American Revolution. So, like, spring of next year, I would really love to go to Boston because, it's right next to Lexington and Concord, and I think it'd be a great time to go to the 250th event for that. In the same way that I'm already tentatively planning on trying to make it to Philadelphia because I think for 2026 because I think it would be great to spend the 250th 4th of July, outside Independence Hall. I just think it's very interesting when you can place yourself in different historical places that mean
Right.
something to you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Like I said, in 25, I'm hoping to get to Waterloo, possibly, or at least Belgium. I want to go to Ypres and other places on the World War One front. 26, I'm hoping to get to the Somme. July 1st would be the 110th anniversary of the first day on the Somme, and so I would love to finally get to the Somme. It's also my wedding anniversary, so that'd be a anniversary present for us is to hang out on the Somme for a day, which my wife would be into. It would be fine. Oh yeah, she'd be into that. She'd be into that. It'd be fine. She would do well with that and enjoy it. So yeah, I totally get this idea of wanting to be in a place at a certain time. I mean, I was just in Normandy on June 6th, and I was leading my tours on the 3rd, but you're still there, right around that time. I wasn't on Omaha on June 6th. I did not want to be there because there was a 3 hour security line to get through. And I'm like, I don't want my June 6th to be remembered as standing in a security line waiting to get to see a ceremony that I can't really see. So you pick, just like everything else, you pick your battle. You pick out literally and figuratively in life. You pick out what you want to go see when you want to go see it that's special to you, and that is a huge thing with studying history is trying to have that connection. Like you could go to next year, you could go to Lexington and Concord, and you could have an epiphany about what it actually looked like. And maybe see it in a different light, or you can be in Philadelphia in 26 and think about the 250ths in a different way as you stand outside Independence Hall. That's the beauty of the the history field. You can have these nerdy moments that are more than just moments to be a geek. They're moments to really reflect, think about things. And when you stand across the field at Gettysburg and think about all that stuff, or you stand at Waterloo or Normandy or wherever, um, there's a lot of good connections there to be had, and I want to try to enable a lot more people to do that and be a part of that whole thing because it is life changing in some ways, even in a minuscule way. It changes your perspective, and I think it's huge to be able to do that.
Well, with that being said, I think it's just about that time that we kind of transition to the next portion of our show. This is about the time that we start reviewing the drinks that we have. John, I know you recently just celebrated your anniversary of sobriety, and congratulations on that. With that being said, what do you have in your glass this evening?
Mhm. I have Sprite tonight. Usually this time of night, me, the old man, I'm gonna have milk before I go to bed. But because I'm that secure of an individual, I've actually drank milk at a bar. I've drank milk at a bar. When people have picked on me, I'm like, oh, I'll show you what security looks like. I'll drink a pint of milk. But yes, no, totally understand that. I knew the bar and I knew the bartender. I knew I'd be fine, but sometimes you might want to worry about doing that. But yeah, tonight is Sprite Zero because I'm also older and I need 0 calories so I can stay kind of trim. Uh, so I can go on these walks. But I hope you guys had a drink for me because I can't drink. So I hope you did.
Well, well, I'm doing mostly dry July, so I have flavored water with me.
Mm, okay.
I say mostly dry July because on July 1st I kind of forgot and I had a Sapporo for lunch. And then the next day I tell some friends while we were at lunch, like, hey guys, I decided I'm doing dry July. And then somebody without missing a beat, didn't you drink a Sapporo yesterday? I'm like, shut the fuck up, Colin. And normally I would have gone the whole month sober, but um, this month is my birthday, and on my birthday I'm going to be at a bachelor party. So those two events coinciding, I might as well drink. You know,
Yeah.
girl can't hold out forever.
How about you, John? There you go. There you go.
I decided to take just a little bit of a break, not like a dry July situation, but I recently got the opportunity to be a volunteer for a local police academy's wet lab, where basically they give you free booze and get you drunk so that little baby cops can practice their field sobriety tests on you. And I realized I just can't drink like that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what is your go-to when you do drink?
I
For
usually try to
both.
do something relevant. Like if we have like a submarine movie, I'll do like Sailor Jerry's Rum and Coke or something like that. Uh, but normally, I'm a whiskey guy.
Mm, okay. Yeah. Mm, hmm. Okay. Okay. What about you, Jack?
What my favorite alcohol is?
Yeah. What's your go-to drink when you're out and about?
Beer.
Okay.
Mo- and I love fruity beer. Love a
Ah.
good sour.
Okay.
One of my favorite beers is Berry Noir.
Hmm. Okay.
It's a sour, fruity beer. It's like mixed berry, one of my favorite flavors.
Mm. Okay.
Yes, what's not to love? Sour, mixed berry, ale. That's like three of my favorite things.
There you go.
It's a
Three
damn
food
shame
groups.
it's only available sometimes at the local liquor store.
The older I got, the more it hurt, and the older I got, the more I realized I was just going down a bad path because I don't have the switches that you do, where you have one and you're like, okay, I'm good. So I was born without that switch, and so was, you know, most other men in my family, going back generations. So it's just a you inherit it in some cases, and I did. However, I will say, for me personally, sobriety has been amazing because now I can eat more, and I can eat a lot of like desserts now because you ingest so much sugar. With I was a beer drinker. I'm like Jack. I was a beer drinker. You ingest so much sugar through drinking. I found that a lot of my colleagues or my peers who have gone sober, like I have, we're chocoholics now. Uh, we eat a lot of sweets and we don't gain weight. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever because now I can just have cake. I remember one day at work, I had like 5 donuts, and I'm like, it doesn't affect me. I'll go on vacation and I lose weight, and I'm like, okay, this is the best thing to happen. This is a great problem. I would have stopped drinking years ago, or I would never would have started if you've been like, you can choose this or chocolate cake every day. I'll take the cake every day, or pumpkin pie, or whatever the case is, ice cream. Now I can have that, and I'm fine, and how I'm not diabetic from all the beer I drank, I don't know, but so luckily there is a side effect that's very positive. Not only do you feel better, about, at least me, feel better about life in general and my health. Uh, but I also get to eat whatever the hell I want. So that really makes me happy, because I'm going for like donuts almost every day now. So it's fine, and the doc says I'm okay. So everything comes back fine for my age.
I think a lot of doctors are like that, where it's like they're totally cool with like a lesser of two evils. Because like my dad quit smoking a long time ago, but when he first quit smoking, he put on like 10 or 15 pounds, and the doctor's like, between smoking and being like
Not
10
that
pounds
nice.
heavier, I'll definitely take the extra weight.
Yeah, that's the thing. Coffee became my drug of choice. Caffeine became my drug of choice. It was coffee, and because I was a Guinness drinker, I drank Guinness. I drank Guinness like it was the last keg, out there. It was nothing for me to drink 6, 7 Guinness, in a night. Nothing.
Man, that's basically a meal.
Right. So when I stopped, in just over a month, like a month and a half, I lost 35 pounds. Just over a month. They thought I was sick. Everyone's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." But because of that weight, ingesting all that Guinness, I put on some decent weight, and so I dropped that first, and then it was that whole thing of, well, I need something that tastes bitter in a way, thick, bitter. Coffee was my go-to then. It was like I'm going to replace all this with coffee. So I replaced the bar with the coffee shop, and I would just go get pour over coffee because it was cheap, or I would go to Dunkin' Donuts when I lived in the States, or I would go to wherever. I didn't care. If it was coffee, I was drinking it. And that became my thing. And it's still that way. I still drink too much coffee. But once I got over 40, because I'm 43 now. Once I got over 40, I had to introduce myself to decaf, but only after about 7 o'clock at night, because then I wasn't sleeping. And I'm like, okay, I guess I have to bite the bullet and have decaf, because I was always a death before decaf guy. I was in that thing, and now I'm like, if I have coffee at 7 o'clock at night, like I sometimes want to, I won't be asleep till 3 o'clock. So, yeah,
I didn't become a huge coffee drinker until I worked a job
yeah,
with a grave shift involved. And like at first, I tried doing the energy drink thing, and this was about the time that like Bang Energy came out. And
yeah,
when I legit tried that for the first time, I thought I was having like a
yeah.
heart attack, and I'm like, I can't do that. So like
I
I
remember that.
like Stockholm syndrome my way into liking coffee, and I did it like the old man way of doing
Mm.
it, like just straight black.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I was a 3 tumbler a day man when I worked alongside the Army Corps of Engineers, and we had that strong coffee where it was the first pot of the day was always the thickest, and like,
Sugar and cream frowned
oh
upon.
man, oh yeah, it was black coffee, and I swear to God, if you could probably stand a spoon up in it, it was like a mush, But it was the consistency of Guinness. It really was, and I'm like, how did you make this? And they're like, don't ask. And I'm like, I need to know because there are certain things I'm not supposed to drink, and they're like, no, you're fine. Uh, and then as the day went on, it became like pour over, stuff. But yeah, yeah. I mean, I have a coffee mug. I don't wash it. Mm-mm. Yeah, you
It's
season
seasoning. It's extra flavor. You get a little extra each time.
exactly, exactly. You season.
Yeah, I remember my dad was the kind of guy that was
Mhm.
also big into like a seasoned coffee mug, and he'd like legit threaten you if you tried to wash it.
No, no, you don't wash my coffee mug. You just, yeah, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Like the inside of my tumbler was brown from this stuff. And then you're like, what's it doing to my insides? But yeah, when it's seasoned, it's an extra little bit of coffee. That's all there is to it. It gives that little taste. It's like a cast iron skillet. You don't mess with it. It's seasoned. Leave it alone. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If there's anything that's like peeling off, okay. But otherwise, no, let it alone. It'll be fine. But yeah, I'm a coffee holic now, and I get in much less trouble. And coffee's cheaper. When we moved to Canada, I'm like, oh, a couple things are more expensive than they were in the States, but coffee's actually cheaper when you go down the street to get your coffee at like Tim Hortons or something. It's a little bit cheaper than it was in the States. So I'm like in heaven because I can get my fix. And I'm like, oh, it's cheap. That's good. So yeah, it worked out well in my favor.
I'm not a huge coffee guy, like at all.
Mm,
But man, yeah, my morning libation is Monster Energy and Adderall.
nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Keeps
when
me
you'll
sharp as
you'll
a
find me
knife.
at a conference, Jack. Like someone will find me at a conference and they'll be like, "Where's Heckman at? Like, where's he sitting?" And all you have to do is scan the tables, and when you see a coffee and a Mountain Dew together, that's where I am. Mountain Dew's the
Yeah.
chaser. Yeah, yeah, I get it. I understand.
So I think at about this time we should move on to rating this film. As you might recall, we don't do stars around here. We think stars are kind of boring. We usually try and find something that's indicative or representative of the film. I'm open to suggestions. However, something that really stuck out to me that I think is an excellent choice would be there's a scene where all the generals for the British side are on their horses and they're having like wine or something pre-battle and it's being served to them by some
Mm.
anonymous foot soldier. We never actually see the soldier. All we see is like his hand, and on top of his hand is like this silver serving platter. So I personally think we should do 1 to 5 serving platters.
I thought for sure you were gonna go like croissants.
What are we, racist?
Yeah. Oh, I'm part French. I'm allowed to say it. But yes.
I'm
Okay, silver
vaguely French.
platters. Okay. Who are we starting with?
Let's go with Jack. How many silver platters would you give this film?
This was not my favorite movie. I'm gonna be honest with you. Um, I'm gonna give this 2 silver platters and half a hon from a hon. So functionally like 2.25.
Wow.
Yeah, I was struggling to stay awake at parts of the movie. But that's probably because I'm so goddamn exhausted.
No, I was just saying that about the ha ha part. That's all.
I took a nap right before this,
Okay. Okay.
and oh my god,
All right, John. I need to hear how many silver platters you're giving this.
So I guess this is where I get to do my little confession time. I'll be honest. Napoleon is not something I really know all that much.
Hmm.
Like I probably have the most basic like high school level knowledge of him of like I know he was an important person during a
Okay.
certain period of time and had like an effect on Europe, but like he's it's just a subject that's so massive and kind of overwhelming for me to consider trying to take on that honestly I don't know where I would begin. That being said, I did enjoy this movie. I think there was a lot of positive aspects to it. I found it very interesting. I enjoyed once we actually got to the battle scene. I thought it was really good. The pacing obviously is kind of a downside to this, so I would give
Hmm.
it 3.5 silver platters. I would say this is a movie that if you're into history, you should watch at least once. But with that being said, John, what would you give this film?
So it's definitely one that you should watch if you're into history. It's just one of those epics that should be watched. It's kind of like if you're into action movies, you should watch Die Hard once. You should probably watch this once if you're into history. Um, there are those little moments in it where it does get slow, and I just say that that's probably due to the time period that this is made. If it was made in 2024, I think it'd be a totally different film. Um, so it is 1970, so we have to keep that in mind as well. I am not of the opinion that this is like, uh, you know, you're going to learn so much from this, or you're going to know so much about Napoleon at the end of this, or anything like that. I'm keeping it real, with that. So what I will say is that I think I'm going to give it 3.75 of those platters with a croissant and make it a 4. And I'm allowed because my people are French. I actually had an ancestor with the Grand Army, so I'm allowed to do the croissant jokes. It's fine. He survived the retreat from Moscow. I don't know how, but he did it. He's buried in Maryland now. He decided to come to the United States. So yeah, I like a solid 4 rating for me personally. It would be more if those slow scenes weren't involved. It's not going to be a 5 from me. I'm a hard grader with some of my stuff, but it's a solid 4 for me because it is so well done as far as the battle scene is concerned. There's so much involved with it. There are those shots that make you really ponder what it was like and really make you go, wow, that's a hell of a shot. It's a cinematic masterpiece in that way. At certain times, there are those moments. So I would say I'm going to go with a solid 4 on mine. And I forget what I even rated Gettysburg at. I think I might have been a 4 then. I don't remember.
I think you were like in that 4
Yeah.
range.
So for me, I'm pretty even with my thoughts. On these 2 films, I'm kind of like in that 4 range for that as far as the movie is concerned.
All right, Jack. What does Rotten Tomatoes give this?
Right. I have it pulled up right here. Yes, sirree. I am looking at it right now. It is loading perfectly. There is no... the thermometer says 30%, and the audience score says 83%.
I gotta say, the thermometer feels wrong on this.
Audience ate this shit up, and thermometer spat it back out.
So that's about a 4 out of 5. I thought the thermometer would be higher, not 80. I thought it would be
I guess
I thought it'd be like 60 or something, but
Yeah, we oftentimes find ourselves a little bit at odds with the peeps over at Rotten Tomatoes. But with that, thank you so much for joining us, John. If you'd like to share any social medias or projects you got coming up, the floor is yours.
oh, thank you guys for having me back, John and Jack. It was great as always. I would love for people to go on my YouTube because I'm going to be doing some initiatives on YouTube later this year. I think people might be interested in, and I'd love to grow the audience there. YouTube.com/The Tattooed Historian. Obviously, it's free to hit that subscribe button, so I want to send you there because it is free. I'm on all the socials as far as looking up The Tattooed Historian. You'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, all the old stuff that us old people are still on. I'm on TikTok as well, but I don't do as much as I should. I've been really focusing on YouTube, so I'd appreciate it if you go over there and give that some love. Other things I'm working on as far as projects. One thing is I'm working on behind the scenes. I can't release, but it'll be on the YouTube channel, so that's why I'm directing you there. I'm currently also partnering with the Civil War Monitor magazine to release a podcast series with them. I'm doing an 8-part series that's going to come out later this summer for their podcast. So if you just look up the Civil War Monitor, you'll be able to see that. I'm doing a thing on the summer of 1864 with that. And then check out my socials because in October, as I alluded to earlier, I'm going to be a tour historian on a 15-day trip to Europe. We're starting at Hadrian's Wall, and we're going to end in Paris. Stopovers in Whitby, York, Normandy, and then on through to Paris. So there's going to be a lot of content coming up there as far as that trip is concerned. And, you know, the YouTube is popping. I'm enjoying it, and we're having a good time with it, and there's going to be some more stuff on there. So, and obviously, the Tattooed Historian Show podcast. If you're into podcasts, which you must be because you're listening to this, go check out mine once in a while. We have some pretty cool stuff going on over there, but it's bi-weekly podcasts, not weekly, because I'm old and I'm tired, and I can only do a podcast every other week. So I'm tired, boss. I'm tired. So yeah, started this all in 2015. Started podcasting in 2017, and it's just like, okay, bi-weekly is the way for me to go. So so you get 2 a month out of me now, and then a lot of live streams on YouTube, videos, stuff like that. So I'm mainly a visual guy. I like to live stream with my followers and others, and I like to do videos. So you'll catch a lot of my stuff on YouTube.
Well, everybody at home should definitely go check that out and give him a like, follow, and what have you. If you want additional content from us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Discord, and whatnot under Armchair Commanders Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. The stars do matter. John, thank you again. And until next time, I've also been John, and we've also had Jack with us, and we'll see you next time.